The regular meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council from March the 5th, 2019 is now in order. Good evening. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Two of our neighbors, Henry and Carol Blaha, as you may know, lost their home to a really serious fire this past week. Please keep them in your thoughts this evening as we take time for a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you, Council. I need a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Jim. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. We have an agenda. Excuse me. At this time, we need a motion to approve a consent agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Jim. Do I have a second? I will second the motion. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? If not, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Consent agenda has been approved unanimously, I believe. All right, thank you. This time I'll call on our town planning director for his presentation. Good evening, Wes.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Thank you. I have a brief report for y'all for tonight for the month of February. There were 6 zoning permits issued, 26 building permits issued. Those consisted of 4 additions, 3 remodels, 1 repair, 2 accessories, and 16 others. There are currently 21 single-family dwellings under construction in the town, and the total amount of fees collected in February was $6,862.97. With respect to the March 18th Planning Board meeting, the board will be performing the duties of the Board of Adjustment and will be holding a public hearing to consider ZTA, or excuse me, VA-1901, a variance application submitted by Starkey Sharp for a variance from Section 36-132 of the Southern Shores Town Code. That's for the property located at 64 Ocean Boulevard. The board will also consider ZTA-1901, and that is a zoning text amendment application submitted by the town of Southern Shores to amend the Southern Shores Town Code by amending Section 36-57, definition of specific terms and words, Section 36-202, RS1 Single Family Residential District, and lastly 36-205, R1 Low Density Residential District, and that ZTA is done, it's to address the large homes issue. The board may also continue its discussion of non-conforming lots at the March 18th meeting. Any questions?
Council? Thank you, Wes.
Thank you, sir.
This time I'll call on David Cole, our police chief. Good evening, David.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. The February 2019 Police Department's report. Officers responded to and conducted 1,149 calls for service. You can see the breakdown at the bottom. As far as the incidents/crimes that were reported, we had 1 fraud, 2 drug-related, 1 driving while intoxicated, one related to alcohol, one traffic, and one was a welfare check, and an exploitation of an older adult, and that was to have to do with a scam, for a total of 8. Under the criminal arrest for the month of February, made 3 drug arrests, 1 for the alcohol violation, 1 for the traffic, 1 for the driving while intoxicated, for a total of 6. We had 1 motor vehicle accident, and out of 56 traffic stops for February, officers issued 23 written citations and another 23 warning citations for the month. That's all I have. Any questions?
Do you have an update on that vandalism we had on Ocean Boulevard at 60, I guess it was 64?
We're still following up on leads, but so far we haven't come up with anything substantial at all. So, still open and pending. I do want to mention that we, over the last day or two, been investigating several car breaking and entering. Actually, that's not even fair. The cars aren't locked, so they're not really even having to break into them. But we've had several vehicles throughout the town, a lot of them on Hillcrest, Sea Oats area. We're going to put out a thing in the newsletter again, asking people to please lock your vehicles. If nothing else, it's a deterrent. But some people have had some stuff stolen out of their vehicles. But all of the vehicles were unlocked to the best of our knowledge. A couple of them even had the keys in it, and I'm amazed that they didn't steal the car. Anything else?
Thank you, David.
Thank
Read
you.
my mind.
Thank you.
I was going to remind people about that. Ed Limbacher, our fire chief. Good evening again, Ed.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Brief report for you tonight for the month of February. Fire Department responded to a total of 37 calls, 3 building fires, 27 EMS calls, 2 motor vehicle accidents, 1 hazardous condition, 1 gas leak, and 3 alarm activations. Again, a total of 37 for the month of February. Any questions on that?
Council? Thank you, Ed.
Just a quick note about the fire. I was very impressed with the way everyone worked. Not that that would surprise me, I would expect it, but the guys did well, everybody from the police department all the way down to the EMS and everybody in between, so I was very happy about the result. Even though it was a major loss, it was dispatch is fully involved when we got there, so it was contained just the initial structure, which is well.
Thank you.
guys did a good job.
Thank you.
Mr. Limbacher, I've had a lot of people come up and say what an outstanding job your guys did.
It wasn't just me, it was a group effort, but it was done, did very well. I was proud of them.
Yeah,
So-
you should be.
Hopefully that'll be it for this year. Don't like home games.
They're a good crew.
Thank you.
Did you determine the cause of the fire?
No, it's still under investigation. I was with the fire marshal today. They're still investigating, so.
Town manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. If you recall, at your February 26th planning meeting, I informed you that I would be attending the meeting of all the managers with the county manager and the chairman of the Board of Commissioners and all the mayors the following day to discuss protocols for utilizing funds in the occupancy tax beach nourishment fund that the county maintains. After discussions that day, it appears that by 2022, there will be $7.5 million in the fund available for new projects. And I use that term new projects because they're very specific about making sure that that's not confused with maintenance money, which has already been set aside out of that fund. So by 2022, there would be $7.5 million available for a new project. There are other spots in the county that are in need, apparently, of beach nourishment. However, the message from the county is that if Southern Shores would like to participate in that 2022 allocation, that they would need for the town to basically pull the trigger and commit to a project as soon as possible. That soon as possible preferably would be our first meeting in April if the council is serious about engaging in the beach nourishment project that was discussed on February 26th. The $7.5 million would be the county's share. In order to be able to access that, Southern Shores would have to commit to double the other half of that to do its project. So running the numbers, we would have to commit, the town would need to commit to roughly 8 cents, the revenue from 8 cents on the current tax base of the town. That's not to say that when the planning pans out with DEC and Associates, if you choose to hire them, that revenue couldn't be raised through municipal service districts or a combination of a district and town-wide. We would have to at least come up with revenue that could be raised by 8 cents town-wide in order to participate. So I think the message from the county is if the Southern Shores is serious about a project for 2022, they would need to hear something from the council in the form of a commitment resolution. If you wanted to do that, I would recommend that it be placed on the April agenda, and you certainly could have a public hearing at that time on it as well. If you choose to pass that resolution signifying to the county that we're serious about a beach nourishment project, I would recommend at that time too, as we discussed, you hiring Carter and Associates, DEC and Associates at that time, not only for this current year, but to go ahead and start immediately in their financial planning. And that could be on as well if you choose to commit to that project. So that's the message from the county, from that meeting. The second item I wanted to report to you on, in your boxes, there is a letter notification from the Mallards Cove Patio Home Association. You're familiar, I think, with Mallards Cove off of South Dogwood Trail. Apparently, the association would like to offer ownership of their private street to the town for ownership and public use. They'd asked to be on your agenda for April meeting, and I'm going to respond back to them by letter tomorrow describing what type of documents y'all would need to be able to analyze that and consider their offer. Of course, would include the construction documents, if any, surveys, what knowledge is known about the road, number of people who did, in the association, who did consent to this offer, et cetera, and see what type of data I can retrieve for the council. And then the mayor can make a decision whether to put that on the agenda for April or not. But that is a request by that association to be heard about it in April so far. But again, I have no backup documentation for you to consider yet. So that's on the small street that you know of as called Mallards Cove Loop. And those are the only two items I have for tonight's report to you. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions.
I've got one. Regarding the Mallard Cove, do you know if they have been escrowing or, banking any monies for that, that's pretty common?
I know nothing other than the letter, and I have a response going back to them to ask for anything, any and all information, but I really don't know anything about it other than what the road looks like right now. And I don't know the condition of it. I don't know the history of what's underneath it. I don't know what encroachments are there. I know nothing. We'd have no data on it.
Well, just as a thought here, because, this is the first time I've heard about this, but oftentimes, in my experience, communities will be banking money so that when they do need to repair streets, they've got a pot to draw from. It might be nice in your discussions with them if we could find out if they have been doing that, and if so, would that be transferred to the town also?
I'll put that on the list of items of information that I'll request from them on y'all's behalf, so you can consider it.
Thanks.
You need a motion from me or from this council to go ahead and move forward, or direction from this council to move forward with placing this beach nourishment discussion on the April agenda?
I'd report it to you. If that's the council's pleasure, I would certainly
Well, counsel,
encourage you
what-
to put some direction.
You've heard Mr. Vasco's presentation, you've heard the presentation we received from Ken Wilson from Aptim. What are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts?
Yes, I would like to add it. I'm not sure how to make that motion, though, what exactly to say. Let me try a stab at it, though. I'd like to make a motion to add further discussion about the beach vulnerability and assessment report with the possible decision-making by the town of a go, no-go for a beach renourishment project in 2022.
Do I have a second, counsel, to that motion to discuss this further?
I'll second it. I mean, it doesn't hurt to discuss it. We're not obligating ourselves to do anything.
No, but as Peter said, as our town manager just reported to us, in meeting with the county, I was also at that meeting, they made it very clear to us that they would support a 50% share or whatever the dollar amount might be to help us with the project should we decide to move forward with one. The question we have to ask is, are we willing to, at this time, look hard at doing this in 2022? The impression I got from that meeting was that and Peter, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the next time monies would become available in any number of dollars would be 2027. So if we didn't take advantage of the opportunity in 2022 and go ahead and commit sometime in the next few months, then we'd be looking at probably not having an opportunity again until 2027 to do anything. I think we should definitely discuss this in April, for the April meeting. I think we should probably have a public hearing at the same time, so we can get those two things behind us and hopefully make a decision at that time, to accommodate the fact that there are other hands looking for some money for their projects here in Dare County. Any other discussion, council? Yes,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I think we really need to hear from the public. That's a critical move. As I recall, that bill could be anywhere from, what, $9 to $13 million? Based on what Ken...
$9 to $13 million, if we assume that the county's going to, which they've done in the past, is to pay 50% of the cost.
Yeah, it's still a lot of
We're
money.
looking at $4.5 to $5 million, up to $7 million, $6.5 million.
Right. I just don't think it's a good idea to make hasty decisions. I mean, we can discuss it. Maybe we should have another public forum to, again, educate the public on what this entails. I mean, this is a lot of money, and I'm sure there are a lot of people that are going to have concerns about it, and we really need the public's involvement.
Yeah, I agree with that part of it. It's a lot of money. I don't mind discussing it, but, you know, how many public hearings did they have at Kitty Hawk when they were going into beach nourishment? 2 or 3?
They had one to pull the trigger and to commit to it in the beginning, but there are 2 or 3, 4 or 5 actually during the process.
Yeah.
So y'all, if you commit to it, you'll have numerous public hearings throughout the process, including the one to set up municipal service districts. I think one thing to bring out, I've given you the figure of what it would cost approximately if the town had to raise the tax rate town-wide, but that's not to say that's what that would be if the service districts are created. So if someone comes in a public hearing and says, what's my tax bill going to be if you do this project, we won't be able to answer that this early in the game. It's just too early.
In the form, what is Dare County looking like? What do they want to see in terms of a commitment? Is it, like, what does that mean exactly?
That
is it a commitment
means-
that we're definitely going forward, or is it just that we are interested in it and we're willing to do the due diligence and outreach, as Gary's suggesting?
They feel the county is looking for a firm commitment from the town of Southern Shores to proclaim we are committed to this project. And that's what every other town did with their projects. And they also committed to raising the revenues necessary for that match in the same action. So that's what they're looking for. If, you know, if they made it clear, if the town does not do that, then the money's wide open for other areas of the county to pop up and seek that money. I'm talking about other areas of the county, not only any of the towns, but Hatteras Island as well.
Okay, let me ask, and you may not know, so in the monies the county's got set aside for the renourishment, is Pelican Watch involved, is that
Yeah,
in that part,
no, that's in a different part. So the maintenance money,
in the maintenance? money?
maintenance is separate from the $7.5 million that
But
comes
that's
up.
already put aside? for-
Yes, that's right.
I
Pelican
made a
Watch is on-
motion a moment ago. Does it need to be amended to make that a public hearing?
That would be nice. That would be clear direction from us to go ahead and advertise for your next meeting.
I'd like to amend that motion to include a public hearing at that meeting then.
Thank you, Jim.
And I'm not sure the value of more forums on this. We had forums a few years ago. Everybody has been following this. We can schedule a forum, but I think just having a public hearing, the council knows about this issue. We've had the reports. To delay it with more forums, I think just doesn't make sense. It's up to the council to make a decision here. Now, at that public hearing, we will have plenty of input from the citizens, I hope, enough for us to make a decision. That and the other financial questions that you're bringing up.
I don't disagree with you, Jim, but when you're talking that amount of our tax base being obligated, we really need to do due diligence to get the public to acknowledge and know that they are aware of what we're doing. I think that's important. And I don't care how we do it. I mean, it needs to be out there, and it needs to be, because, you know, if we got 1,000 people out the door at the next meeting, we'll know what we got obligated, or 150 in here and got them out the door. But when you're talking about raising their tax base that much, you need to let them know ahead of time.
These are discussions for the April meeting then, public hearing and to discuss this, so.
Yeah.
Any further comments, Scott?
Well, based on what I heard Peter say earlier, they're expecting a commitment as early as April, is that right, or did I misunderstand you?
That's correct. So, but you can always, you know, you can always take a chance at not giving them a commitment and let it go on. But that's the message, the clear message I got. And Mayor, you were there with me.
I heard the same thing. I did hear a willingness to help us, unquestionably, but that help us was if we make it, we got to make a decision to move forward or not. Now, let's be honest about this whole thing. This 2022 project may not take place in 2022. We don't know that for sure. That's a target date. That's going to involve a solicitation of bid process and a bid process which we won't be part of directly. But in the last project, if you recall, that slipped for over a year because of the costs were so high, and they were able to lower the cost by moving it forward and getting more people, more contractors involved. The same thing could happen again. We don't know. It's too far away for us to know that.
Mr. Mayor, one other point that I wanted to emphasize, the cost that you got the day before on February 25th, 26th meeting were based on being able to, excuse me. The cost that you got on the, at your planning meeting in the report were based on that new project taking place at the same time as the Kitty Hawk maintenance. So if there's an idea about not doing it in 2022 and not waiting until 2027, but maybe doing it in 2023 or 2024. We got to go back to the drawing board and re-estimate the whole thing. Plus, at that point, we're risking losing the 2022 commitment if the county responds back and commits to a commitment. So I just want to make sure everybody understood that.
The big issue there, folks, is the fact that you've got, if we can piggyback on a county project with 3 other towns or 4 other towns, there's a shared cost for mobilization, which we wouldn't have if we tried to do a project on our own. It would not be a shared cost, it would be our cost. And typically, that would be in the $2 to $3 million range just for mobilization, just to get them here. So that's something that has to be considered very carefully as well. We have a motion by Mr. Connors to call for a public hearing and discuss this issue at the April meeting. That motion was amended to
have it a public
to
hearing.
have the public hearing. I'm sorry. Do I have a second for that amended motion? Thank you, Chris. Is there any further discussion? Council, all in favor of placing this on the agenda for this beach nourishment, potential beach nourishment discussion and project on the agenda for April, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Anything else from us, Peter? Thank you. Town Attorney's report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything to report.
Thank you, Ben. General public comment? Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you. Nancy Birondelli. Good evening, Nancy. Nancy brings us gifts tonight.
Excuse me, I'm a little short. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Nancy Birondelli. I reside at 303 Sea Oats, and I'm here representing the League of Women Voters this evening. I would like to present you with your very own copy of the 2019 Citizens Guide. I don't think you'll lose it on your desk. Rather bright and orange. This is our 31st edition of the Citizens Guide. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, but the years do pass by quickly. We published 7,000 copies this year, and they were distributed throughout the county from Hatteras to the mainland to all the towns. And many went to the county for their distribution and to DMV for voter registration and the Board of Elections. We would like to thank the town for your contribution for the sponsorship. The back page has all of the organizations, towns, businesses, and members of the public who do provide the financial support to put this document together. I'm also pleased to announce that we also now have a Spanish version of the Citizens Guide. We published it for the first time last year, and it will be replicated again this year. So thank you again for your support, and the League of Women Voters would be happy to have any new members who would like to join. We are open to all men and women of voting age. So thank you very much, and here are your copies.
Thank you, Nancy. Anthony DiBernardo. Good evening, Anthony. I used to calling you Tony.
I get called a lot of things. Maybe you'll be called more after this, I don't know. You are short. Hi, I have 2 comments tonight, and I believe they'll both dovetail into each other. The first issue is the ZTA on how to limit bedrooms, hopefully to the 7-bedroom previous standard. I'd like to submit that the simplest and most direct ZTA would be to utilize the septic system of 7 bedrooms or 14 individuals. Other solutions have been discussed and on the surface appear to be long and cumbersome. It would be advantageous to be clear and concise on the ZTA rather than long and hard to interpret, rather than a long and hard to interpret ZTA. The old adage of KISS applies to this issue as far as I'm concerned. The second issue that kind of dovetails in is the two Saga structures are now advertised on Carolina Designs. I don't know whether you have seen this yet, the advertisement. I'm requesting that TOS be proactive and not have to rely on reactive responses to these rentals. Besides the standard rental description, the following is noted. Special events welcome, maximum 100 guests, and $3,500 event and $3,000 security deposit apply. Now, 100 guests, really, in Southern Shores? And also, I'd like to, as a side comment, does this make it cross over to a commercial property? If they're charging $3,000 and $3,500 security deposit, is this really a single-family development, single-family home? This raises issues that should be proactively addressed. It's a Saturday-to-Saturday rentals, both of them, which is wonderful, which naturally will cause traffic increase. Now, I understand you can't address the traffic increase other than what you've been doing. Parking for 100 guests. Think about that. Parking for 100 guests. Where? The other thing is safety. Now, we're talking about the amount of people staying there. We have fire concerns as far as I'm concerned. Are there exit signs, fire extinguishers, sprinkler system? No, because it's not registered as commercial. It's a single family. Police problems, 100 guests. That's a lot for the police to handle. Noise. Remember residents were upset over a lanyard noise a few years ago? Same location, now we have 100 guests. Also take note to the structure at Chickahawk. Advertised 5 of the master bedrooms are assessed, you can get into them from a covered deck. This design was not in the best interest of Southern Shores, and is this a quasi-motel? An Airbnb? You tell me what it is. Separate entrances. Please be proactive with these concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, appreciate it.
You did it.
Ann Swordsma? Good evening, Ann.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Ann Scherdsma, 69 Hickory Trail. I am going to speak to the proposals that are outlined under old business. Some of you have probably read the blog I posted and are probably not real happy with me today, but I just want to make a few points about these proposals. One is that, to my knowledge, ZTA 1809 has never been subjected to a public hearing. On February 5th, there was an attempted hearing, but it was aborted by the town council when it decided to sort out the multiple versions of ZTA 1809 by sending one version back to the planning board with a directive for doing a comprehensive evaluation of the non-conforming lots in town. So I'm wondering now, what is on the table? Are you now undermining what you did last month when you directed the planning board to do a comprehensive assessment of the non-conforming lots with this proposal to now recommend ZTA 1809 and it looks to be to enact it? This is all very irregular, this procedure that you've undergone. I would say the same thing, Mr. Mayor, about the motion that you apparently are going to make. It appears to be driven by preferential treatment. If it's not, I would be happy to stand corrected on that. We currently do have a non-conforming lots law. I think you all are aware of that, passed in September, and there really is no need to have a motion like Mr. Bennett has proposed. It's already possible to sell and develop a lot that meets all the legal requirements, a non-conforming lot, and meets all the legal requirements at the time that it was created and recorded. provided that there's no issue of combination. And this motion that you're proposing looks like you're removing the, undoing the combination feature of the ZTA. Please bear in mind that this is a ZTA for the entire town. This is not a ZTA for Mr. Love at 64 Ocean Boulevard. Now, he may well be threatening litigation. I hope that's not influencing you. I also would like to say that I'm not satisfied with the disclosure that Mr. Nason gave at the last meeting in regard to his relationship with Mr. Love, his financial arrangements, what benefit he's already received, and I would appreciate some consideration on recusal if you go ahead with either one of these motions. Mr. Love may be threatening litigation. I don't threaten, but I do think that an ethics complaint is something to be considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ann. This time, council will take our first item of under old business. Let's close public comment first. I apologize for not doing that. Public comment's now closed. And no other persons are signed up. Under old business, item A, proposal to adopt planning board's recommendation, planning board GTA 1809 PB, non-conforming lots, public hearing held February the 5th, 2019, requested by Councilman Connors. Mr. Connors, do you intend to make a motion? You wish to make a motion, I should say.
Yes. I make a motion that the town council adopt ZTA 1809 Alpha as presented to the town council by the planning board at the town council's February 5th, 2019 regularly scheduled town council meeting. Having made that motion, Mr. Mayor, if this gathers a second, I would respectfully request to be the first one to speak on this motion.
Can I speak first if it's all right? Would that be all right, please?
Do I have a second to the motion? I'll second the motion.
I'll cede to
Thank
Mr.
you.
Nason.
I think last time we were in the discussion, and we were at the point, and I don't know if it actually happened, where Ben had given his opinion that I should recuse myself. I don't know whether the vote actually happened, but I will, as I said in my comments, I'd happily assent to Ben's comments and offer to recuse myself, but I have to ask council to do that. I don't know if we ever went through that process. Let's complete the process, if possible here.
My recollection is that we didn't go through that process because there was a motion with no second. So it didn't come to a vote. Now you've got a motion with a second. I think it's appropriate for the council to consider whether or not to recuse Mr. Nason. It'd be appropriate for one of the five of you to make a motion to do that. My opinion remains that he should be recused.
Can he not recuse himself?
Can I make the motion?
Sure, certainly.
I'll make the motion to ask council to recuse me from this vote per the town attorney's guidance.
You second the motion, Gary? Thank you. Have a second by Mr. McDonald. Any discussion about Chris's motion or the second?
I tend to back Chris up on this simply because it's the appearance. And now, well, anyway,
Actually, we discussed this
We did discuss it.
several meetings ago, and gave the explanation.
He sure did.
He was the architect for that property and designed that house for that property.
I mean, even though I'm not working on it currently and have accepted no funds, we want no,
Doesn't matter.
exactly, we want no appearance of impropriety.
All in favor of accepting Mr. Nason's proposal to recuse himself, indicate by saying aye.
all right.
You're recused from any action on this, on item A here, Chris. Thank you.
So we're back to my original motion.
We are, Jim.
Is it appropriate to speak?
We had a second. Yes, you may speak on that motion.
What I'd like to mention is that for many years, as I've driven around through the town Southern Shores, I've noticed a lot of flat squirrels in the road. They're flat because they were unable to make a decision. At this last council meeting, we were unable to make a decision, and that seems to be a developing pattern among the council. I would like to approve this motion because it solves the original problem that we started off on recombination of lots. Further research is going to be taken, but I see no reason to keep delaying this and continuing to act like those flat squirrels. Everybody's done their job on this. The council did the job to get the, to start this. I remember very clearly that the mayor and I went in the town council the next day after a planning board meeting approved one of these. The planning board has done their job. This is a very confusing issue, and we just keep kicking the can down the road. If we do not adopt this motion, I foresee at least 3 months, if not more, before this will even come back to the council.
Thank you, Jim. Any further discussion?
Well, if I may, at our last meeting, we sent this back to the planning board because it only, and as I recall, it's only changing for one lot. And I asked that question of our attorney, and he said that's what he knew.
I don't believe that's correct.
Well, it's in
There are
the-
two different changes.
But
One
one
was,
part was
one would
about
address
one
one
lot.
lot, and then the other would address.
And it did not
multiple lots,
address
so we
the
knew.
other non-conforming lots. I mean, we had a gentleman speak, and we had several others that we're aware of. So we directed the planning board and staff to go back and identify all the lots that are non-conforming within the town. And that passed, if I recall correctly, it was a unanimous vote to send it back. Am I wrong in that?
I don't remember the vote, but I know we did send it back to the planning
Okay.
board.
So that they could bring it back to us. The other thing I thought I noted, and I may be wrong, is, yeah, Elizabeth's here, she'll know. Planning board didn't act on this one, ZTA PB. They voted on 09, or, let me get my numbers right, 1809 at their meeting, and directed that it be corrected, which I would assume would mean come back, and that would become, and that became PB.
That's not correct. What they did was they voted to recommend it with a specific change, and that's what 09 PB is the recommendation with the specific change.
And that specific change was,
Specific change was the inclusion on line 40 of not adjacent to any other, I think that was it. Single non-conforming lot. Yes. Not adjacent to any other land under the same ownership. So everything from not to ownership was requested, it was a recommendation with that language be included in that spot. That's different than a vote to draft this and bring it back to us. It was a vote to recommend it with that change, and that puts it in front of this board appropriately.
okay, thank you. But since we sent it back, no action's been taken on this ZTA by the planning board. So, you know, we directed it to go back. I have issue with the fact that, you know, a full council directed something to go back, and we're bringing it back without giving them the chance or the opportunity to deal with it.
Mr. Mayor,
Procedurally, I think that's
They didn't finish. Go ahead, Gary.
not in line with what we directed that the planning board do.
Right. Okay.
and
Yes.
staff.
Yes, Jim.
Belay that. Never mind, sorry.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could speak to that too.
Yes.
My recommendation was that it wasn't to send 09 back, that it was to get the planning board to do specific work, including, and staff to do the specific work of determining the non-conforming lots, and then having the planning board consider all that and come up with another recommendation that would be different than 09. It was not, my recollection, also I think I recall, I might have made the ultimate wording of the motion, but I don't recall exactly what it was, but that it was not related necessarily to this specific provision ordinance anyway. So you've had a public hearing, it's had a recommendation from the planning board. The board can either vote up or down on the motion if it was. Or it could table it, it could do whatever it wants to do. But I think it's appropriately here, from a procedural perspective, for the board to consider this evening.
Any further discussion, council?
Yes, I'd like to just add that I'm deliberately trying to call a vote on this. I want residents to know that we're trying, at least some council members up here are trying to solve the original problem. Work on this needs to continue.
I think that's what we directed at our last meeting.
I call the question, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor of Mr. Council's motion, council indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Aye. So we have 2 votes for and 2 votes against. The motion did not carry. At this time, I would ask the council to allow me to make a motion that I would hope would be combined into whatever happens after, from this point on with this ZTA, as a PB or whatever they call it. I will move to have town staff draft a ZTA for planning board consideration with proposed ordinance language that would allow the sale or development of a non-conforming lot that is at least 20,000 square feet in area and greater than 50 feet in width. And that's my motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Jim. I'll speak to this first. There was some discussion here earlier about this being selectively picking out one property. That was not the case at all. I did a little bit of homework and found that we have a number of properties in Southern Shores that make the 20,000 square foot number, but are narrower than 100 feet wide. And this motion is made either as a standalone to be addressed with the planning board on its own, or as to be worked as in combination with the ZTA 1809 PB, and be incorporated in that if we can do it that way. Any other comment about this?
Tom, would you be, we discussed different house sizes. Would you be open to less than like 15,000 to 20,000, setting a size on a house? For example, we got 6,000 square feet for any house in our community, 20,000 square feet for our lot. If you had a 15,000 to 20,000, would you, looking at maybe 4,000 square foot home, 10 to 15, 3,000 square foot home?
Does that relate to this motion?
Yeah, I think not. Thank
Okay.
you. I understand where you're coming from.
Am I
and
allowed-
That's something we could probably consider, but this is not part of my motion is very specific.
I understand.
It addresses lots that are non-conforming only because of the width of the lot.
Well, we have non-conforming that are less than 20,000 that we could address
And that's a separate issue, and we could possibly address that.
with the same thing.
I'd rather not
But that's
incorporate.
okay.
It gets pretty cumbersome, I think.
Just asking.
So, and I would comment here, I think Mr. Nason can vote on this issue if he wishes to.
I think it's okay for him to vote on this one, since it's sending it back to the planning board, number one, and I think even even considering this Schurzma's analysis and numbers, I don't think it's clear that it relates to any of the properties that he's related to. And I don't think that was the purpose, but I think the planning board's going to consider it, and when it comes to a vote, that will be a decision at that time, given the facts at that time, whether or not that vote on that ordinance will need to be up or down. And one other thing to take into account, that's when the issue comes up, is when there's a vote on an ordinance. That this is not a vote on an ordinance.
And I'll abide by, at the time, I'll abide by your guidance, so whatever you say, we'll go ahead and do.
So, Tom, if I understand you correctly, this is merely a motion to send it to the planning board for their consideration, and they will come back with a recommendation?
Yes, exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, so we're not actually voting on any ordinance then?
No. All we're doing is getting this particular thought process to the planning board, and this measure that would address, once again, another type of non-conforming lot. That's all I'm trying to do.
Okay.
Motion's been made and carried. Motion's been made and seconded, council. All in favor of my motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. I didn't get the final numbers, Sheila. No one's opposed. Thank you. I appreciate it, gentlemen. This time I'll call on Councilman Newberry. He wants to discuss the membership and composition of the CIIP Committee, Capital Infrastructure and Improvement Committee. Fred?
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll start off the discussion with the motion, and then I'd like to, if we can get a second, discuss my thoughts and the reasoning for it. The motion is, I move that the CIIP be solely composed of citizen representatives, and that the councilmen currently on the CIIP should resign from it, and their seats be filled by citizens representatives approved by the council.
I'll
Count-
second that.
You second, Gary? I didn't ask for a second, but I will. Thank you, Gary. Any discussion, council?
I've got some points I'd like to make
You can do that.
now.
You're actually the first speaker on this one.
Okay, great. Thanks. As I said, I don't think any council member should be a member of the CIIP. I admit, I served on it for a short time because the policy at the time, and I think it's referenced in our materials tonight, the mayor and the mayor pro tem were to be co-chairs of this committee, and by the fact that I was mayor pro tem at the time, by default, I was on the committee. I think I attended maybe 2 meetings. I've done a lot of rethinking about that, and the more I thought about it, I think it should be a committee of citizens, obviously approved by the council, which we have done. And I believe the citizens should be able to identify, research, and recommend capital improvement projects and not be influenced by the council. However, the council has its opportunity to make decisions when the CIIP bring the recommendations to us, and then we can certainly vote on it. I think the CIIP should have access to staff resources, like the county engineer and the town manager as required. But I think the fact that council members should not be influencing those decisions, just like the planning board. The planning board does not have council representation, although we can attend those meetings. I know when I go, I stay quiet because I don't want to influence the committee, and I think the CIIP should be the same way. And that's my reasoning for removing all council members from it. I attended the last meeting, and it was pretty obvious to me that the 2 council members were influencing the committee, and I don't think that's a good idea. I think we should have our say when it comes to us for a vote. And that's pretty much my rationale.
Thank you, Fred. Any other thoughts, council, on this one?
I mean, from my standpoint, a while back, we talked about this, and I think it does tend to get awfully political, and I think unnecessarily so. I mean, so I guess I'd go a step further. I'd say abolish it. It's the last committee, let's have staff do their job, and then it comes to council, and then we go from there. So that, it's a little different than what you're describing, but I think it gets council members off it, and then let staff do their job and prioritize this, and then we can, as a council, can look at it.
I tend to agree with that, especially on the politicizing. We're taking a basic function of what our town is and politicizing it. I just don't see this working well. If anything, I think it should just be abolished, like Mr. Nason, and just turned over to the town manager. Do we want to make that motion now?
No, Fred's got it.
No, I mean at this meeting.
The motion on the floor.
Yes, I got that part.
It's been seconded.
No, let's go through this first. I'm interested to hear what Mr. Mayor has to say.
Having worked with the CIP now for over 5 years, I think it's been very effective. I think the people on the committee have done an excellent job, not just the council members who served on it, but the citizens themselves. We've always had at least 2, sometimes 4, now we're up to 5 representatives from the town, from the citizenry. Almost without exception, they do a great job. I wouldn't take anything away from them at all. They're contributing meaningfully at every meeting we have. I think at the last meeting, there was a little bit of a situation that developed where we were trying to, we were talking about the South Dogwood walking path. And I had a difficult time explaining to the members of the committee that I wanted to see us take the money to fund that path out of the undesignated fund balance rather than take it out of the CIP monies, the street improvement monies. And it took a while to get that message across, but eventually we all agreed, and the consensus was that we would take the money. I would, at a later appropriate time, would ask the council to fund the walking path, should we decide to do it, from our capital reserves, and not from our unassigned fund balance, I'm sorry, and not from the CIP monies. And that was the only time during the meeting that I recall that I had any discussion where I felt I had to do my part to make sure we could get those monies taken, not taken away from the street improvements, but taken away from the undesignated fund balance. I personally think the committee idea has worked well with members of council on that committee. I think it's helpful to have us there. See no problem with it. That's all I have to say about it. I'm not in favor at this point in time, or this juncture, of abolishing the committee completely. I think it's still could be made to function very effectively the way it's structured now. And that's all I have to say about it. Anybody else have any questions, any thoughts, any comments?
My only other thought is, I think that you're doing a disservice to the people on that committee, the citizens that are there. They're not being unduly influenced by us. They have had extremely valuable contributions, oftentimes where they disagreed with other members, and their way carried the day. So I think we're I just disagree that we're having undue influence on them.
It's okay if you disagree.
I did it civilly, too.
You want to say?
Yes, I'm sorry. Truly, it's hard to get community members involved, but having our community members participate and have a voice is very important. I don't think we need to dissolve that. Our planning board, our historical committee that goes and does all that work and all that hard work, they put their hearts into this. And, just when, and y'all know how I feel, because when we did away with all those other committees, I was against that. But having our community have a voice, it's a show of transparency, it's a show of that we care about what they have to say, and I think that's very important to us as a council. I'm sorry some folks don't feel that way. 'Cause they're very important to us. I mean, think about how hard our planning boards have worked over the last 3 years and how they've served us. Sam and then Glenn and now Elizabeth. I mean, that's a tough task. And I do agree with Fred in that if you sit as a council member on a committee, you do have influence over the members, and you have to be aware of that. And sometimes we have our own priorities, and we may push it when we shouldn't, and not even realize it. So with that, I agree, and that's why I second that.
Thank you, Gary.
I don't think anybody is diminishing the value and importance of citizen input here. Not on this, there's nobody here on this council I know that's doing that.
Our members of the CIP committee right now are doing a terrific job. I can't take anything away from them. They're really contributing. In fact, within hours of a meeting being over, we get feedback from certain members of what they've been to look at the projects we're talking about and done their homework. So I'm very pleased with that. At this time, I'll call for a vote on Mr. Newberry's motion. All in favor of having council members removed from the CIP committee indicate by saying aye. All opposed? Same sign. Motion was not carried, so we will maintain our membership, council will maintain their membership on the CIP committee. Thank you, Fred. Nothing under new business. General public comment. Anybody else sign up for that? Thank you, David. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Ann Schwartzma. I'm going to say it eventually, Ann.
They probably say it that way in the Netherlands. Anyway, Ann Scherdsma, good evening again. I wanted to speak to beach nourishment because I figured that you would. I think you're making a rush to judgment. I strongly disagree with all 5 of you in having this public hearing, quote unquote, in April. We're a month away. There's no way you can possibly get the word out and inform the public and get people here to voice their opinions and to know what's going on in a month. And you can't do it in the context of a town council meeting either. You can call it a public information session if you don't want to call it a forum, but you're doing a great disservice to the people of this town if you go ahead and pull the trigger, quote unquote, in April for a beach nourishment project which Southern Shores does not need. And the issue is not whether we piggyback in with these other towns and get 50% of the county money and have it all done in 2022. The issue is whether or not Southern Shores needs to nourish the beaches. It doesn't matter what the other towns are doing. It only matters what Southern Shores beaches look like. And we've always had an advantage here in Southern Shores, and that's why many of us and our parents bought here, because we knew the beach was sustainable, much more so than the beaches to the south of us. And we know we have a stable dune, and it's been holding up well. In fact, Mr. Wilson said that. He said, in fact, he used a turn of phrase, you're getting in more early, he said, than anyone else ever has, if you pull the trigger this time. I don't know why you would want to make a commitment to this kind of ransom, if you will. Once you get involved, you can't get out. So why do you want to rush to judgment and take Southern Shores hostage for $4 or $5 million? I don't get it. I really don't. Just because there's money there when we don't even have to do this? There should be some assessment of the need. not whether we can get money and collaborate with these other towns. When we had that forum on beach nourishment back in January of 2017, I talked to Spencer Rogers, who's a scientist, a coastal engineer, about the need here in Southern Shores, and he said it didn't exist. He didn't even think beach nourishment at Pelican Watch was advisable. And here we have one civil engineer who's making money off of every town on the Outer Banks, telling us, here are your options if you choose to do this. Now, how many people can look at 3 options and walk away? I hope you will. I hope you won't pull the trigger in April, or at least hold off, because you're rushing to judgment and you're not listening. You're not even getting the word out to people. That report is not something anyone's going to read. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ann. Is it Barnhart? Glenn?
Yes, I'm a permanent, new permanent resident, and this is my first meeting.
You,
I signed the wrong form.
no problem at all.
I'm just learning.
This is not the first time that's happened. Thank you. In a few minutes, we're going to be going into closed session with our town attorney to consult with him about an issue having to do with a hearing before the Southern Shores Board of Adjustment. For that, I want to just make one quick comment about the whole beach nourishment idea. We didn't make up the window. We weren't told you have to apply by a certain. We didn't decide ourselves that we have to make a decision within 30 days. That was not it didn't come from us. That came from the county. We had this pot of money. If you want to be part of this process, and you need to be, then we'd like for you to join in. If you don't want to be part of it or don't need to, you don't have to join in. My point of my comment earlier when I said there's a window here of opportunity if we want to take it. We don't have to. We can disregard, ignore it, and go on and take our chances on our beach not needing a nourishment before 2027, if monies are available then. That's really all I'm going to say about that. It's something we don't have to do, as we all know, but we have the opportunity to do it if we so choose, and with some financial help as part of the process. Any other council member have any comment they wish to make? Yes, Rick.
I agree with you on the beach, the beach nourishment. The only reason I voted for a public hearing, I want to hear what the public has to say. I do agree that we shouldn't rush to judgment. A month to make this kind of decision is way too short. There needs to be a lot of due diligence. I do agree with the fact that Southern Shores beaches are not in that bad a shape. There's some areas that are, no doubt about it. But I own semi-oceanfront property, and I go to the beach fairly often, and I've watched it over the last, 20 years. It comes and it goes, it comes and it goes, but it's always there. And with proper maintenance, with sand fences and that sort of thing, maybe we can sustain it for several more years and not commit to this kind of expenditure. But there again, I'd like to hear what the public says. And I certainly don't want to jump to a decision in April. That's just way too soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else, anything you want to add? Jim?
Not add, well, I'd like to make a comment. On February 15th, I'll be holding a public hearing here in the town hall to discuss the possibility of bringing a branch library to Southern Shores. This is kind of like an exploratory session. Well, let's talk it out and see if there is interest in our town, and if we can gauge that there is interest in the town, we'll take it to the next step. But I would highly encourage everybody to come out and learn what I have learned to date through informal means, and then we can decide on where we go from here.
I believe you meant March
15th,
What did I say?
February.
Man, that was my birthday month. I'm stuck in that month. Yes, to clarify, March
March
15th at
right.
6 PM. I would also like to thank the SSCA, CPOA, the town, and everybody else for helping to get this word out about this meeting.
Did we vote to have that meeting?
This is Mr. Connors doing this as an informational meeting. So he informed the council of it, I believe, a couple of months ago and explained what he wanted to do, but the council never took any action. So Mr. Connors is gathering information.
Please come out.
Excuse me.
Josh, you have anything you want to add? No comments. You all right?
Yes, I do. I would, one thing, since we are, sitting here thinking, I would ask that we put the discussion of the beach nourishment and the public hearing at the very beginning of our next agenda. Move everything else down, do our consent agenda, and then go right into it if we're going to do it. Also, we need to get notices out ASAP, several notices anyway that we can, to let the public know so they'll be aware that we're beginning that process and only beginning to discuss it. So they have the opportunity to come and give us the input, because we really need to hear from them. The other thing was, Tony brought up a good point, and do we have an event ordinance that stops that kind of events happening?
Wes, would you like to speak to it or not?
Thank you, Wes.
The council adopted an event amendment about 3 years ago.
I can't really speak with specificity about those properties, but we do have an ordinance in place that addresses facilities where the primary function is to host events.
Well,
The primary function.
when it's advertised that it holds an event for 100 people,
Mm-hmm.
I think we probably need to look and see what we can do to make sure those kinds of things don't happen.
We can certainly look into it. I agree with you.
I don't think anybody disagrees with that, Gary. We're all on the same page. I think.
We can look at whatever wording is being advertised.
I would just think that would be a nightmare for our police department on a weekend to have that many cars parked out there on the, I mean,
We don't,
we'd have tow trucks in line back out there.
to my knowledge, we don't have any that exist today. So if one were to come about, or if we were to learn about one, then we would certainly investigate it and see if it meets
If they're
the
advertising.
criteria for a violation.
They are advertising it. I looked it up while you were speaking, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Wes.
You're welcome.
You want me to make a motion, we go into closed session?
Just in a minute, in a minute. One last thing, Peter, is would it be possible to consider even more quickly a public meeting about this, a public hearing about this beach nourishment idea?
You mean as far as?
As far as the timing, instead of waiting until our April meeting, could we back it up a little bit?
I think if you back it up, the longer, I would recommend keeping it in April because it's that much more time for us to advertise it.
And get people out?
Yes.
Okay.
But if it's a consensus of the council, you can decide right now to put it ahead of staff reports on the agenda. And we won't have any more discussion about that if that's the consensus of the council.
Is that all right, council? The April meeting, to put it ahead of staff reports and have a public hearing at that time?
I'm sorry, can you state what you said?
Yes, the public hearing and consideration of a commitment resolution would be ahead of staff reports on the agenda for next month, as Councilman McDonald recommended. If it's a consensus of the council, we'll do that, and we want to talk about it again.
I think that's a good idea, because that's what will pack the room, and that's all they probably care to hear about.
Okay? If that's consensus, we'll
Council, are we in agreement to do that way? All right.
Yes.
Thank you. You have our consensus, Peter. Need a motion, council, to go into closed session? Gary, thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. This time we'll We're in a closed session at the request of the town attorney. Sorry.